Good morning and welcome back to the Women in Mars Conference. Those of you who were here yesterday, we had a really great program. We had great STEM discussion, talked about all the technology we need and the infrastructure and capabilities we needed to go to Mars, as well as several other great topics, and as always, a great talk by Dr. Penny Boston. Today, as you know, we have another great lineup of speakers and topics, starting off with a policy panel first off. Then we're going to have a really exciting science panel, and then we'll have Rebecca Kaiser wrapping up the regular part of the conference, at the end at 11:30 today. Just a reminder for those who ordered lunch, the lunches will be downstairs just after the end of Rebecca's talk. We should have a few extra lunches if you want to purchase them for $10. There aren't a lot of them, but we should have a few extra ones if you're interested in purchasing lunch. Let's see. And as for the online audience, as you know, we're being webcast today. So for anybody online, you'll see you can ask questions through the chat feature on the website. Should be on the side of the screen, I believe. We also have the option of tweeting us questions with the hashtag #WomenAndMars. I would also like to let you know that if you go to, and we're going to email you everybody who came to this conference, a new issue of Mars Exploration magazine just came out today. It's a special Women in Mars issue, and I think you'll like it. So that will be emailed to all of our participants today, as well as everybody else. I would also like to thank all of our sponsors. Specifically, I'd like to thank NASA for webcasting this event. I'd like to thank our silver sponsor, Aerojet. Our reception sponsor last night, Boeing. Bronze sponsor, Google. Our education sponsor, United Space Alliance, and that particular sponsorship helped to bring science teachers into this event. So we're particularly thankful for that. Tote bag sponsors, Hamilton Sunstrand and Pratt & Whitney. Our breakfast sponsor, Reactive Surfaces. Our supporting sponsors, Lockheed Martin and Phillips & Company. Our friend sponsor, Busick, Space Propulsion. Our media sponsor, Space News. I'd particularly like to thank the Space Policy Institute for being the hosting organization here, without whom we could not have run this conference. So thank you very much, everybody with Space Policy Institute. I also want to thank our other nonprofit sponsors, the Women in Aerospace, Conrad Foundation, the Planetary Society, IEEE Women in Engineering, and the National Space Society. For those of you who want to log on to your computers in here, there's also free Wi-Fi. So if you log on, you'll go to the event, the GW event link, then put in the username Jack Morton, all lowercase letters, and the password is eventguest11. And also, for those of you who want to watch yesterday's programming, most of the programming is already up on the website right now, on the livestream.com website. So if you go to livestream.com/ExploreMars, you can see all the programming except for the STEM panel, which will go up a little bit later. They had a little problems getting that up, but that should be up shortly as well. At any rate, let's get to our first panel. Today, moderating our panel is Marcia Smith, and she's the president of the Space and Technology Policy Group in Arlington, Virginia, which specializes in policy analysis in civil and military and commercial space programs and other technological areas. She's also the founder and editor of Space Policy Online. Prior to this, she's worked in many positions, including director of the Space Studies Board at the National Research Council. She was director of the NRC's Aeronautics and Space Engineering Board. Previously, she was a senior level specialist in aerospace and telecommunications policy at the Congressional Research Center. She specialized in U.S. foreign military and civilian space activities, as well as telecommunication issues, including the Internet. She served as executive director of the U.S. National Commission on Space. She also served at the Washington office of AIAA. She is the author and co-author of more than 220 reports and articles on space, nuclear energy, and telecommunications and Internet issues. Ladies and gentlemen, Marcia Smith.
Thank you very much, Chris. And I will just add one other quick thing. If everybody could remember to turn off their cell phones and other things that beep and all of that, I'm sure that would be better for all of us. And since this is a group of people who are interested in exploration of Mars, I thought I would just give you a brief update on what's going on with the Russian Phobos Grunt mission. As many of you know, Russia successfully launched this robotic mission to Mars. It's a fascinating mission, a sample return from Mars's moon Phobos. But unfortunately, something went wrong once it got into orbit. And the latest news I have this morning is that they have not been able to communicate with the probe. They thought at first they were going to be able to, but the latest news is that they have not. They haven't given up. They had a signal that the solar panels had deployed, and so they hope the batteries are still charging, and they think that they still have a few more days to try and figure out what went wrong and possibly fix it. So anyway, I hope everybody has their fingers and toes crossed that this very exciting scientific mission will in fact be able to leave Earth orbit. Today, of course, we're talking more about the human exploration of Mars, and this panel is looking at the policy aspects of it, and I think we just have a terrific panel that spans the breadth of the private sector and the government to talk about the policy aspects of Mars exploration. And when we were trying to figure out exactly how to frame this question, we did come up with 4 framing questions that I hope can be projected. There they are. They're a little wordy, but it does try to get at the nub of the issue as to how, from a policy standpoint, you know, the White House and Congress will be looking at these issues, especially during these very difficult budget times. So I would like to introduce the panelists. I'm going to do it just before they speak because I think for the web watching audience, it's easier to connect the person's name with what they're saying if we go just one by one down the table instead of trying to introduce everybody at the beginning. So we're going to start this morning with Patty Grace Smith. Patty has over 25 years of experience and knowledge of the U.S. space sector. She served as Associate Administrator for Commercial Space Transportation at the FAA, where she was responsible for regulating the U.S. commercial space transportation industry. She joined the Department of Transportation in 1994, and prior to that, she worked, among other places, at the Federal Communications Commission. She was telling me the other night that she worked at the FCC and was regulating satellites and wanted to find out how the satellites got into orbit, and that's what brought her into the field of launch vehicles. She has also held positions in the private sector at the National Association of Broadcasters, Westinghouse Broadcasting Corporation, and Sheridan Radio Network, and in government at the Department of Defense, the FCC, and the Senate Commerce Committee. Currently, she is an aerospace consultant with Patty Grace Consulting, and she is on the board of Space Dev, the Space Foundation, the American Astronautical Society, the American Bar Association's Air and Space Law Forum Board, the X Prize Advisory Committee Board, and the Conrad Foundation. So, again, these questions that you see up here are just framing questions. No one is expected to go through the list of them and answer them. It's just a way to help them think through what they want to contribute to our discussion today about policy. Patty?
Thank you, Marcia, and welcome everyone. I'd like to thank WEA for sponsoring this session, along with a number of the other sponsors for this conference. This is a very exciting topic, a very provocative topic, and I hope that some of the things that I say will get us thinking about what we need to be thinking about. In a city like Washington, D.C., policy discussions go on every day, all day, in a variety of different quarters and settings. But I would bet that rarely are there discussions outside of NASA and maybe in a couple of, in a few other quarters that have to do with Mars and opportunities to be had by going to Mars. I totally agree with those who articulate powerful reasons for going to Mars, reasons like to gain knowledge about Mars, to gain knowledge of the Earth, since Mars is most similar to Earth. For the challenge, just to go for the challenge. Americans have built a valuable history, populated with events, challenges, accomplishments, lots of achievements that have demonstrated over and over the fact that we Americans love challenges. We thrive on them. To go for the future, Our future must include destinations beyond us, destinations like Mars. But obviously, these reasons have not been enough to propel our interest in going to Mars to new, sustained, programmatic heights. Is going to Mars, I ask, an imperative for our nation? Is it an imperative for America? Yes or no? If you answered yes, why are we then so inconsistent when it comes to our getting there? Does the fact that some say that men are from Mars and women are from Venus have anything to do with it? Oh, that's another subject. The optimal trajectory is every 22 months. We've managed to continue that. Robotics enhances our ability to go there, and yet we continue to have difficulty getting money to sustain any kind of robotics program. With every mission, we should be adding to the infrastructure we find or have located there. We don't even refurbish the infrastructure we found there so far. If this does not change, we will potentially lose whatever benefit, whatever infrastructure there is there. The partnerships that we have forged, I would suggest, with other countries or country institutions like ESA, it would appear that these partnerships are formed out of convenience. We renege on our partnerships and therefore lessen the possibility of sustained relationships. And that's what an imperative requires, that it be sustained. A sustained relationship that will be necessary when building other civilizations on places like Mars. Is it an imperative to go to Mars to solidify once and for all the belief that we Americans are not alone in the universe? Well, some would say yes. Why would it be important for us to know and to be the first to announce establishing real relationships with other life existence, with the thought of growing forward a new civilization, with benefits to our nation and to others with whom we might build real relationships, new world civilizations? Russia has been largely unsuccessful in its missions to Mars. With Mars's update, we will remain hopeful with this latest mission. In contrast, NASA, America, has been largely successful with 13 successful missions to Mars out of 18 attempts, with 5 for 6 on landing. I do not believe that the tremendous success we have had with robotic Mars probes has caused Congress to take a position of been there, done that, making it that more difficult to build passion among others for going to Mars and stepping up a robotics program. If that were the case, I do not think that Congress's position has been there, done that. But as I heard so many times when I was in my role at the FCC, walking the halls of Congress, talking to members about space, trying to engender a passion, an imperative that said we, America, needed to pursue, solidify, and sustain our rightful place in space as a leader. What I continually heard was, you know, that sounds good. We too are excited about it, but it simply doesn't rise to the level of a bread and butter issue. It's not what our constituents talk to us and clamor for every day when we're operating as we are right now with constrained budgets. If we believe that going to Mars is a national imperative, we have got to put together better strategic messaging, communications messaging that makes it so for other Americans. If it were so, as we travel around the country, and all of us do travel, I'm sure, we'd be hearing it in imperative language. We would be talking about it in imperative language. We need to go to Mars. We've got to go to Mars. Robotic exploration is a means to human exploration of Mars if we adopt our exploration of Mars as a national imperative. I think there will be some political support for missions to Phobos and how do you say that?
Deimos.
Deimos, thank you. Some policymakers will see that support as a step toward Mars. The question is whether one step is enough to sustain a mission to Mars, or are year-to-year steps on a road with a destination to Mars and return landings going back over and over again on a yearly basis and doing it over and over until we have a program, a sustained, imperative-driven program with a destination called Mars. Certainly this will not happen without advocates and stalwarts in Congress who are willing to advance exploration of Mars by calling it a national imperative, by insisting that it is a bread and butter issue, just of a different kind. Where are they? Where is the clarion call to go to Mars? If it's there, why aren't our policymakers as a whole hearing it? The quest to explore Mars will require lots of private money with some disproportionate investment of federal dollars. I do not believe that government will be the consistent leader that imperatives require. So if government will not, who will? I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Patty. And we actually did not rehearse this, but our next speaker is here from Congress. Leslie Gilbert is the staff director and counsel of the House Committee on Science, Space, and Technology, where she helps shape and implement Chairman Ralph Hall's agenda and manages committee operations. The committee oversees R&D programs at a variety of agencies, including NASA. And prior to her appointment on the committee, Dr. Gilbert was Congressman Hall's legislative director, where she advised him on energy and commerce and science committee issues. Before coming to Washington, she was a history professor at St. Mary's University of Minnesota. She has an undergraduate degree from Texas A&M and a master's and PhD from the University of Kentucky and a JD from the Washington College of Law at American University, and is a member of the Maryland Bar. So Leslie, tell us what is on Congress's mind.
Thank you, Marcia. Thanks for everybody. Thanks for the sponsors of this great panel and conference, and good morning to everybody. Can everybody hear me okay? Yes. Okay, thank you, good. I don't have a lot of long remarks because I know you have lots of questions, and I want to certainly get to questions quickly, but I wanted to give you a little bit of an overview, sort of following up on what Patty was mentioning about what's going on in Congress, what are some of the challenges ahead for lawmakers, and how to best overcome those challenges. So I guess as the representative from the Hill, I sort of get on the hot spot in terms of what's on policymakers' minds. But, to the very basic question, Mars exploration does continue to hold the interest of Americans and then by their extension, policymakers. It's still considered the ultimate goal of human exploration. When people say, where else can we go? We've been to the moon. Mars, obviously. We've been to a moon. Let's go to a planet. So it certainly does hold a lot of fascination for many, many people. Whether it was President Bush's Moon to Mars Constellation program or President Obama's Mars Exploration program, Mars has been and will be the great challenge for human spaceflight moving forward. So the prospect of future human exploration of Mars spurs interest in the Martian environment and in technologies capable of getting humans to the surface. So over the past few years, we've seen remarkable accomplishments related to Mars exploration. Clearly we had the early stage probes of Mars and early on, but even since 2001, we've had the Mars Odyssey, Mars exploration rovers, the Spirit and Opportunity rovers, the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, and then later this month, we're hopefully going to be launching the Mars Science Laboratory. So, we have had a very steady and consistent stream of successes related to Mars exploration. And given this exploration sequence, it isn't surprising that the National Academies of Science recommend a Mars sample return mission as its top planetary mission for the next decade. The entry, descent, and landing system, or the EDL, that will be used to land the Mars Science Laboratory will test critical technology needed to land larger payloads, such as humans. Moreover, testing flights to return the Mars sample will help develop the technologies needed to return humans to Earth, in addition to the obvious benefits of getting samples from the Martian surface. So one of the biggest challenges moving forward from a congressional or policymaker standpoint is maintaining focus over a long time frame. So from a congressional point of view, it is difficult to talk about a year or even 2 years out, let alone 20 or 30 years out. And so you have to sort of understand where I think members of Congress and senators are coming from, in the sense that it's you may have a long view of things, but in terms of the tangibles, they tend to be year to year, or even, like I said, 2 to 3 years. A NASA authorization bill, for example, is 3 to 5 years max. So just to give you a sense of the time frame there. So I think the key will be to keep a set of measurable and clear milestones for the near, medium, and long term. Otherwise, things get lost. It just sort of seems like monopoly money, you know? It's, 30 years from now, well, great. You know, where are you going to be in 30 years? You know, it's hard to even think in terms of those big time frames. The other big challenge is quite obviously budgetary. It should be a shock to no one here that we are in fairly austere budget times. The Congress and the administration are taking a very close look at flagship missions. And the most recent Planetary Science Decadal Survey urged NASA to restructure these large missions to fit within a budget that is not expected to grow over the next few years. And so I think that there is a big debate going on between flagship missions versus sort of smaller missions, and how do we fit those into the bigger picture. So speaking of which, I do want to point out to the audience that our committee is planning on holding a Space and Aeronautics Subcommittee hearing on this topic on Tuesday morning, this coming Tuesday, titled Exploring Mars and Beyond, What's Next for Planetary Science? And during this hearing, we're going to hear from witnesses like Dr. Jim Green, the director of the Planetary Science Division at NASA, as well as Steve Squires, the chairman of the Planetary Science Decadal Survey at the National Academies, on the challenges ahead for planetary science. So like all of our hearings, you can watch those online from our website, and we'll certainly welcome you to do so. But thank you, and again, I look forward to any of your questions.
Thank you very much, Leslie. Our next speaker is going to be bringing a perspective from academia and the science community. Pascal Ehrenfreund is currently the research professor of space policy and international affairs at the Space Policy Institute right here at GW. During the last decade, she was professor at 3 universities in the Netherlands, and she led the astrobiology laboratory at the Leiden Institute of Chemistry since 2001, where she still remains a visiting professor. And she's been involved in a large number of scientific missions and is now the project scientist of NASA's Oreo satellite, which I would love to hear more about, which is NASA's first astrobiology small payload program. She has a master's degree in molecular biology from the University of Vienna, a doctorate in astrophysics from the University of Paris and Vienna, a habilitation in astrochemistry from the University of Vienna, and a master's degree in management and leadership from Webster University in Leiden, the Netherlands. Pascal?
Yeah, I have a few slides. So I thought it's very much in the morning, and just to show you that from the scientific point of view, there are very, very beautiful missions still in this decade, and it is very, very important that we keep this kind of momentum, and that we make a space exploration program sustainable. So I'm the only participant that is foreign nationality, and though I'm well integrated in the United States, I want a little bit also to put the international perspective and answer some of the questions that Marsha asked us to answer in an international context. So as you see, there are many, many missions, and this is actually the Earth, Moon, Mars space missions, which are going to the Moon, to near-Earth asteroids, and Mars, which are currently in the planning stage and or ongoing. And you see that many, many nations, and also Japan and China and India and Russia, Europe and the United States actually partly also work scientifically together to make those really great missions happen. So that's mostly what is going to happen in this decade and starting with the next one. You see that Mars has a prominent role. Mars is the central object of interest for habitability studies and also for life detection beyond Earth. And as we have heard before, it is most convenient object because it can be reached very frequently by robotic spacecraft. So it is certainly the objects where we will be probably most successful in order to look at our origins. And as also mentioned in the NASA, in the NRC Planetary Decadal Survey, the selected flagship mission for the decade 2013-2022 was to make a start or initial phase of a Mars sample return mission. A Mars sample return mission which will be going over several decades. We will be done in collaboration and will have a multi-element character. So I just want to brief a little bit some arguments why it is so important to have a long-term program, and does it actually make sense to have a long-term program for Mars exploration, and can we implement it, and how? And obviously, as we all know, solar system exploration and any mission, any of those missions actually gives us incredible information about where we can answer fundamental questions like about the origin of our solar system, is there life on another planet beyond the Earth, and actually what are the potential opportunities for humanity in our local space environment in the near future. So what is really important, I think, in order to guarantee a long-term program, because we are absolutely all aware of that solar system exploration in robotic and human synergy spurs scientific discovery, and it also leads to strategic partnerships, to technological process. It engages society and inspires them. So there is no question about it. But in order to have a long-term program really sustainable, you have really to align stakeholders from the government, from industry, from space entrepreneurs, the scientific community, the society at large. And that is something which is crucial. They have to have a compatible, a common, and if not common, but at least a compatible goal at national level developed and later on an international level. That will make a program sustainable. So the fundamental principle, you see here all those interactions, and if this people all drive towards a common goal, all those stakeholders, it will be much easier to guarantee a long-term program. How do you do that? In space research, we do that since many, many decades, and also in international cooperation, that we have a shared vision. And there are many, many international science and analysis working groups which have done a great work over the last decades to present roadmaps and to have a vision. And the vision is here. We do not have to reinvent it. There are wonderful roadmaps about lunar exploration, about Mars exploration, which are actually available by many, many organizations, which give you all the bases and all the questions you want to have answered. So this is something following such a vision, and I would say implementing a program on a basis of such a vision, that will probably be the clue and the key in order to have a space exploration platform that is also internationally based, and where also new countries, new emerging countries and developing countries actually join, and it will be a broader, it will be like a bottom-up support structure in order to have a broad basis and more interest and a strong background for a long-term program. So You see that the vision is crucial in order to go very far and to look at this program and exploring our Earth, Moon, Mars space. And it will be very, very difficult actually to achieve that, in particular in international cooperation. We see how difficult it is, partly getting if only two nations and two space powers work together, and how the things often do not turn out. So there will be a lot of work done, and what many, I would say, research and analysis working group are working about are on such kind of a transition phase to when we are actually really able to have a sustainable program with many, many partners, stakeholders, and countries. And that is a transition phase where we start out with small missions, and many of them are science-based because scientists are the key. They are collaborating worldwide since ever, and there are some of those programs which have been elaborated. We have heard of some of them before. Yesterday about the ISS exploration research, and we will hear more in the science panel thereafter. So there are a lot of programs where people can start to work together and make a difference, learn how to solve interfaces, and how to overcome technology transfer rights and regulations on a simple basis, going closer to more complex endeavors. And there are these international analog field programs. They are worldwide. Probably they will be mentioned later in the science panel, which gives international cooperation a chance to work together, preparing for exploration in extreme environments on Earth. And we have mentioned the space station being an incredible source of research, working together and preparing for exploration. Also, small-sat programs, in particular the United Nations, is helping developing nations and emerging space nations to make worldwide small satellite programs and sustaining them and helping them to build up capacity building. That is another source which is important to strengthen an international space exploration program. And obviously, sample return mission, they are something which are always at the forefront for everybody, particularly the Mars sample return mission, but also to Moon and near-Earth asteroids. And they are most affordable, conducted in international cooperation. So these multi-element scenarios, they give a possibility for several spacefaring nations to join and also develop one of the elements. The international sample curation facilities, for instance, is something we can foster extensive science and engineering collaborations and exploit worldwide expertise. So, and then we grow up in complexity, like the coordination of international surface and orbital elements for research as envisaged in the global robotic village by several of the space exploration science and space and technology exploration groups. So I want to finish by saying that, and a point which makes, I think, something which makes this kind of space exploration program also worldwide very sustainable is to have the link and exploit the synergies between Earth science and space exploration. And in particular, when we are looking at the area of Mars sample return, where we are waiting for samples, there is an incredible amount of work which has to be done on Earth, and at the same time, we learn actually to learn about Earth. And it will be crucial in order to enlarge, I would say, to bring broader interest to space exploration, that will be more sustainable. More countries, more stakeholders which are aligned to go towards a common goal. That will really aid program stability for global space exploration. And I think I'm done.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Pascal. Our next speaker is going to be bringing a perspective from the private sector. Stephanie Bednaruk is the government affairs specialist at SpaceX. And I know that you heard from someone else from SpaceX yesterday, so you probably know a lot about the company already. But what I find most intriguing is that its president, Elon Musk, describes his goal as making humanity a multi-planet species. So I think that he is in tune with what this conference is all about. Before joining SpaceX, Stephanie held positions here at the Space Policy Institute, at the Space Foundation. She and I worked together at the Space Studies Board at the National Academy of Sciences. She also worked at the Aerospace Industries Association and at Orbital Sciences. She has a BS in Aerospace Engineering from the University of Virginia and an MA in Science and Technology Policy from right here at GW. And she is currently the Vice President of Programs for Women in Aerospace. Stephanie?
Thank you very much for the kind introduction and the opportunity to speak here today. I'm honored to be sitting on a panel with such distinguished leaders in space policy. And I have to give a special thank you to Marcia, who inspired and encouraged me to study space policy while I was an engineering undergrad and working with her at the National Research Council. I'm very appreciative of this forum and groups like Women in Aerospace who provide leadership and speaking opportunities for those of us who are early in our careers. Given that this is a broader policy discussion and not about specific technologies, I'd like to point out that my remarks are my own and not necessarily reflect the opinions of my employer. However, speaking of SpaceX, my boss, Elon, as Marcia mentioned, started SpaceX with the intention of helping to make humans a multiplanetary species. I think that there are a lot of different ways that SpaceX and other companies can play a major part in making that happen. It's an important and valiant goal, something that needs to be a global mission, not just a U.S. policy decision. To begin with, I think there's a significant danger in trying to recreate the flags and footprints paradigm that existed when the United States sent men to the moon. For one, the people who are likely going to Mars don't have a memory of Apollo. While many amazing things have happened in space exploration since I was born, the most significant, by far, are unfortunately the tragic Challenger and Columbia disasters. Further, we are not in a space race, and more importantly, we're not in a war, cold or otherwise, that calls for sending people into space, let alone other planets. We absolutely need to go to Mars and do the other things, but for bigger, longer-term reasons. Most presidents since Kennedy have to some extent tried to recreate this unique period in our nation's history and have called for sending humans to Mars, but there wasn't the budget to back it up. Clearly, for a variety of reasons, none of those declarations have come to fruition, yet. Regardless, we need to push the boundaries and find a way to do so that is technically feasible, fiscally reasonable, and politically sustainable. We live in a fiscally austere environment. That, combined with a political process that requires one-year budget cycles or continuing resolutions, and where Congress can change every 2 years and the administration every 4 or 8 years. Forget the physics and the unbelievable technical challenges of sending people to Mars. How do you agree on and fund a multi-decade program? Looking back beyond engineering achievements, what has enabled successful large space programs in the past? Shuttle, Hubble, ISS, MSL. I believe it's a combination of parochial interest, international commitments, and the involvement of corporations. I think you probably need all three to have a politically sustainable human expedition to Mars. The International Space Station is a technical marvel, but I think it's a political phenomenon as well. If you were going to design and build a space station from scratch, involving over a dozen nations is probably not how you'd go about doing it. The life of ISS came down to a very narrow vote a few years ago, but ultimately prevailed, in no small part because of the international commitments we had made. One option for a future Mars program could follow the principle of having the U.S. being a leader among equals. Somewhat similar to how ISS operated, a series of bilateral agreements with a no exchange of funds arrangement may be the best way to complement current plans. As opposed to a too-big-to-fail mentality, a program that is tied to foreign relations, and even more importantly, corporate interests, may be the best way forward. Companies have always played a role in robotic and human space programs. The majority of NASA's funds are contracted out. From a policy standpoint, having companies across the country in all different congressional districts also helps garner support for programs that might not otherwise sell well on the Hill. Specifically, though, companies operated under competitively awarded fixed-price contracts can offer reliable and affordable cargo crew access to ISS. This not only frees up funds to build the architecture needed to send humans beyond LEO, but it opens up a world of opportunity for research on ISS to continue to learn how to live and work in space. This type of research is undoubtedly essential to human exploration beyond LEO to Mars. Additionally, as my colleague Karen discussed yesterday, there are some commercial options for affordable robotic precursors to Mars. A SpaceX Dragon on top of a Falcon Heavy could be one way of sending science missions to Mars, possibly for an order of magnitude less than some recent large-scale programs. The benefit of SpaceX's systems and other platforms in design today are that they are flexible and can go to different destinations. Personally, I think that since we already went to the moon, unless we're going there to stay, then let's move on and look forward and send people to other places. Wherever we go first, I think we need to go with the intention to stay, not just to plant flags and footprints. If going to asteroids or the moons of Mars may be a good stepping stone to learning how to send people safely to the surface of Mars, then we should go there, as long as the long-term goal is to eventually lead to a multiplanetary civilization. Corporate companies may be able to undergo some precursor missions with not as much support from the government, but ultimately I think this is going to be a team effort, and really a global team effort. Thank you very much, and look forward to hearing what Rebecca has to say and taking your questions.
Thank you, Stephanie. And our next speaker is Rebecca Kaiser, who is NASA's Associate Deputy Administrator for Policy Integration. She's been at NASA for 13 years in a variety of positions, and most recently has been up in the 9th floor with the policy shop, but actually started off in international affairs. So this is turning out to be a panel that really has quite a strong international component, which is terrific, and we might want to explore that some more during the Q&A. And I think that you were here yesterday, so people may have met you already, but she has a Bachelor of Arts degree in Japanese Studies from Wellesley, a Master of Science in Politics of the World Economy from the London School of Economics, and a doctorate in International Studies from the University of South Carolina. Rebecca?
Thank you. I love being on this panel because this is our world, and this is the world that we live every day. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about the NASA context and the challenges that we face in formulating a long-term policy and a long-term strategy for human exploration of Mars. This really hits home yesterday, in fact, at the NASA senior leadership meeting. We were having a very similar discussion to what we're discussing today. We're in the process right now of formulating what we call our strategic planning guidance for the 2014 budget. And as many of you know, we deal with several budget years at the same time. So we are working for the 2012 budget along with our friends and colleagues on the Hill who are working hard on an appropriation minibus for us. We are planning for 2013 and awaiting word from OMB on guidance to tee up the 2013 budget and the President's request that'll come out in February next year. And we're starting planning for the 2014 budget. There is a very quick turnaround to get this strategic planning guidance together, and so we have to ask a lot of key questions that really would be wonderful if we could think about them more long-term and think about them more strategically to come up with more of a long-term policy and strategy. But we don't have the time. We got to get this budget together, and we got to get it through the coordination process. We got to get it through the executive branch and then start socializing it on the Hill. And so a lot of these things that we're talking about with trying to figure out a long-term human exploration program, a long-term planetary exploration program, is such a huge challenge when you're dealing with these quick budget turnarounds. So there is an inherent conflict between long-term policy and strategy formulation and the budget process. The challenge that we face and what we have to do is bring these things more closely together. They have to be. I think everybody expects us to do this, and we need to figure out how to do it better. The Hill, in many of our meetings, they are so right. They want to know what our long-term plan is, and they want to know how it gels with our budget situation. They want something realistic, something attainable, and also something that's going to be inspirational and beneficial to humans in the future. The problem is, as a government agency, it's really hard for us to think that way because we're so busy dealing with these near-term questions that we have to answer. So we're trying, and within NASA, my role is to take the policy that we receive from the executive branch and from the Hill, try to bring them together into reality, and figure out a better long-term strategic planning process. So we have the National Space Policy, a new one that was entered into force, I guess you can say, in June 2010. And just to remind people, some of the things from the National Space Policy that have to do with civil space. We are directed to set far-reaching exploration milestones, and by 2025 begin crewed missions beyond the moon, including sending humans to an asteroid, and by the mid-2030s send humans to orbit Mars and return them safely to Earth. That's in our policy. We're also directed to implement a new space technology development and test program working with industry, academia, and international partners to build, fly, and test several key technologies that can increase the capabilities, decrease the costs, and expand the opportunities for future space activities. We're directed to maintain a sustained robotic presence in the solar system, to conduct scientific investigations of other planetary bodies, demonstrate new technologies, and scout locations for future human missions. And continue a strong program of space science for observations, research, and analysis of our sun, solar system, and universe to enhance knowledge of the cosmos, furthering our understanding of fundamental natural and physical sciences, understand the conditions that may support the development of life, and search for planetary bodies and Earth-like planets in orbit around other stars. So it's quite clear. And much of this is reinforced by our Authorization Act. And we're working hard to develop real programs to meet with this policy in this constricted budget environment. We are in the process now within the executive branch of developing a new national space transportation policy to conform with this new national space policy. And we're at the point now where we're developing the overarching goals of the space transportation policy. Many of these goals are along the lines of what you've heard. There's a specific goal on developing the capabilities necessary for deep space exploration, including the heavy lift launch vehicle that NASA is developing, the SLS, and the multi-purpose crew vehicle, and the other capabilities that are necessary. There's a goal that focuses on our commercial partnerships and developing further commercial partnerships for low Earth orbit and potential deep space exploration in the future. And there is a goal on overall international partnerships. It's extremely important to us, and it's something that I am very interested in as well. And it has a lot to do with Mars exploration because we, NASA, can't go it alone. We need to do it internationally for budgetary reasons and also because it's not our planet, Mars. We need to do it with others. So there's a lot going on. And within NASA, I'm excited because I am going to be heading up a new Office of Strategy formulation. And it's to do the very things that we are talking about. It's to marry our policy that we get from the executive branch and from the Hill with the challenges we have in our budget and try to make decisions not based on the near-term needs, but base them on more of a long-term strategy. We at NASA have a strategic plan, and it's a strategic plan with overarching goals. And then those go down to annual performance goals. What we really need is that thing in the middle, the overall framework that helps us prioritize what's the most important within NASA, what's the highest risk, what's the lowest risk, what's the highest priority, what's the lowest priority, and give that as a framework to our leadership within NASA to help make some of the strategic decisions that we can to come up with a longer-term strategy. And then hopefully we can have this longer-term strategy so we can be more proactive when we go out and discuss our plans with our colleagues in the executive branch in the Hill. I also want to mention something that has also been raised by my other colleagues, and that's the importance of community to policymaking and a big challenge that we have in human spaceflight. So one of the framing questions we have is Mars exploration going to be continuing to be important to NASA? Have we been there, done that, and is it going to continue? And the answer is it will continue. It will continue because we have a very strong science community. We have a planetary decadal survey that directs us to continue to go to Mars. And that helps us, again, formulate and gives us the backing to formulate policy to actually get there. In the realm of human spaceflight, it's a bigger challenge because we don't have a similar specific science community to help us with that kind of guidance and that kind of backing. Who is the human spaceflight community? It's a number of different groups. It's our industry partners, it's the public, it's NASA itself. It's hard to come up with a consistent direction for human spaceflight with more of a dispersed community like that. So the NASA Authorization Act does direct us to work with the national academies to do a human spaceflight study. We and the academies are calling it the Human Spaceflight Generational. And this is to come up with the long-term enduring questions that are essential to human spaceflight that we should work to answer, and help us with guidance on how we should design our program to answer those enduring questions. So we're looking forward to working with the academies on that. It's going to start in 2012, and hopefully that will give us this additional backing so we can form this plan and this policy to get us further into the solar system and hopefully to Mars. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I'd like to thank all of you for really getting us thinking about the policy aspects of these issues. And while everyone in the audience is trying to think of the questions they want to ask, I'd like to start with one myself, which is about the international aspects of this. And I guess I'd ask Pascal and Leslie to address this, at least initially, although everyone can weigh in. But I'm curious, Pascal, from a European standpoint, how damaging is it when the U.S. starts a program and then has to change its mind because of budgetary constraints, as is happening now with Mars exploration? And Leslie, how important is international when the Hill is considering budget requests and programs? Does that factor into their determinations?
Yeah, for the first part of the question, I think that it is important to have a very strong national strategy and have a European identity, for instance, how to do planetary exploration. And one cannot always give all the blame to a partner which cannot hold its commitment, I think, because you have also to have your own identity. I think, to be honest, what is happening in Europe at the moment, Europe did rely too much on international partners. And things don't always go as they are, and the economic crisis is difficult for all of us worldwide. And I think it is important to have a very, very strong national strategy and then continue further to build an international strategy and roadmaps. And if that is, then you are a strong partner, and the more people are involved, actually, I think the easier it gets, because there can be some kind of redundant, the redundancy, and if somebody actually falls out and has problems with a budget, another country could actually fill in. So if you have a larger global space exploration platform, I think it would actually turn out easier. At the moment for Europe, I think it's very damaging, but I think Europe has the will and certainly the potential to build up, an interesting space exploration program by itself. And we have actually just today a big high-level space exploration meeting with all international partners in Italy going on. Should be probably, no, it is still ongoing. So hopefully that goes well. And you cannot always put the blame on other people. You have also to look that you have our own national strategy well, and that was actually also mentioned by Rebecca, before you actually go out and make an international cooperation.
Thank you, Leslie.
Right. Just to tag on to that, I agree that when considering programs for many members of Congress, certainly Chairman Hall, international commitments and keeping your international commitments is something that is a big factor for them. I mean, they are very concerned about making a commitment and following through with it, and making sure that that the program sustainability, that the trajectory does keep going in that direction, and that these international partners are not only maintained but also utilized. I mean, I think as was mentioned many times before, large-scale missions like sending humans to Mars is going to take a multi-nation commitment. And so, even on smaller items, if you're breaking your commitments consistently with your international partners, I mean, this is not a good pattern to establish. And I think many members of Congress recognize that does not breed goodwill on a certain degree. But obviously recognizing that things are going to change from time to time, and that is the big challenge: is how do we you make a commitment, but then again 5 or 6 years later you may have a change in policy, a change in direction, and how to work between those is a big challenge, and will continue to be a big challenge.
If I could just add on NASA and its international commitments, one of the big challenges we have is what Pascal referred to earlier. Scientists are inherently international, and they talk to each other, and they form partnerships at that level. They then come up to the agency level, and we start having discussions, and the question is, when is it really truly a commitment? We tend to look at agreements that we've had, discussions we've had with our international partners as an agreement. And in many ways we have to, because we have to start planning for missions so far in advance. What we're trying to do in this constricted budget environment is look at things, try to vet things better with our executive branch partners and with the Hill before we formally make those international commitments, so that we're sure that we have a solid plan, that we have a good budgetary plan before we do anything with the partner that can cause them to start planning and that we would then have to back down on. So, that's part of just getting more rigor in our system that we're trying to do.
Stephanie, Patty, do you want to add anything? No? Okay, well, good. So, questions from the audience, and for our benefit as well as the benefit of the people listening on the webcast, if you could say who you are and your affiliation and tell us which member of the panel you want to direct your question to, or if it's to everybody.
I'm Artemis Westenberg. I'm a European. I live in the Netherlands. I hold a Dutch passport. And I am also president of Explore Mars, which makes Explore Mars, of course, a very international organization, just by the fact that I'm here as their president, or better said, I'm usually there and do everything over the internet, which thankfully we have. My point as European very often is, and especially now in the budgetary, crunch that is all over the planet, is, will it really help our budget to save 500 million on a mission? If I look at the numbers that's going, in talks about saving the banks in Greece or everywhere, for me, $1 billion as a private person or even as an organization, that's a lot of money. But apparently, for governments talking amongst each other about, the credit crunch, it seems like almost change, peanuts. So what amazes me is that on the one side, European governments, and I know America is talking the same way, if we don't inspire our youth, if we don't keep innovative technologies, if we don't keep at the cutting edge of our technology as a society, we are going to, to lag behind, Japan, China, whomever. We're going to, really go downhill as a complete society. And of course, everyone recognizes that what we do in space is, cutting edge technology. It's cutting edge science. So saving like 500 million or even $1 billion on a NASA budget or a European Space Agency budget is not going to save us from, all the money we need to save, apparently, but it is going to cut our strength as societies very, very deeply. And is that the choice we want to make? That always surprises me because, on the other side, governments are what we in the Netherlands call, crying like crocodiles, because, oh, this is really bad. And, our youth aren't, involved in STEM and we need to invigorate them. On the other side, you have this exciting program that everyone knows that will invigorate, young people in doing STEM, in becoming, involved in engineering and staying involved in engineering. So, get the best of your best at, the level you want to have as a society. And then you're going to, to nibble, on this budget. That sounds completely counterproductive to me. But also it sounds like, what, overall policy for your society do you really have? And that doesn't, just involve space, but your society. So, that's, it's not really a question, but a statement, this is wrong. I mean, please, this is not the way you would run your household as a householder. So why are you trying to run your state household like this?
Leslie, do you want to comment about perhaps the super committee deliberations? And
Well, it was interesting. In thinking about your question, something that a lot of the members of our committee and the members of Congress have often said is, we want to make sure that we keep investing in STEM and basic science research and development, and because they do recognize that these things do deliver innovative solutions in the short and long term. And so there is not, I think, a wellspring of members or in Congress or in the public, saying, okay, let's just axe the entire sort of R&D budget or that type of thing. And yet there are these very practical realities of how budgeting works and how appropriations work. And so not to drone on, but I just want to give a little bit of sense of that. It's, there are, members of Congress that are also saying, look, so that we don't face a situation like many countries in Europe are facing, we really do need to get control of our finances on a national stage. They've sort of committed to a certain level of spending. And obviously, then you can talk about, well, what are the priorities within that spending level? But nonetheless, I mean, these are the level that you're working with. And then when you're looking at an agency budget, or even, if you're looking at an agency budget, I mean, those things have to, as Patty mentioned, those things have to come up against other things that are not necessarily science or technology related. For example, I mean, the very bill that funds NASA also funds firefighter programs and programs for police officers. So, it just happens to be the way in which the appropriations budget is divvied up. So consequently, you do have members of Congress that are answering to constituents back home, and they're saying, we have these very immediate needs of protection, firefighting, that kind of thing. And so versus something that is more long-term, more visionary, and it's not as if people are saying, I don't like that, cut that, it's something that's terrible. It's just that, in a limited environment and with competing priorities, you do have these challenges. And so I think that members of Congress are trying to do the best they can, keeping programs going and keeping the pressure on, while also realizing the boundaries in which they're facing. So it's not a terribly satisfying answer.
Would anybody else like to respond?
Just to speak to your inspiration piece a bit, I think with the rise of private companies being involved in space exploration, it's a new way of funding inspiration on a dime. Seeing smoke and fire down at the Cape is pretty exciting and inspires a lot of people. And SpaceX specifically has high school kids coming to us and saying, this is what I want to do in the future. How do I do that? And we have government contracts, but having that separate, I think you can inspire kids in other ways, not just through government programs. So,
I think we also at NASA, we have great advocates in Congress. Mr. Hall, for instance, he's one of our best supporters at NASA. We have to make sure that we reach out to those who might not be on our committees, but and might not even think about space on a regular basis, but really reach out to them a lot more often and help them really see the benefits of space exploration. We don't do that enough. We need to do that a lot more in this constrained budget environment. As you said, people do the best they can on the Hill, and we just need to do a better job of communicating our importance.
And that we, I think, is a collective we. It's companies, it's people, it's academia, it's young people looking to the future and not seeing a future and wanting to describe what that future would be like and what it would take. Those are the things that resonate, I think, with members of Congress. I often thought when I was hearing, well, it's not a bread and butter issue, I would think about how if we had 20 constituents in that member's office and the member said, we've got dire budget situation here, we've got a request from NASA, we've got a request from the Mars Society to do more in terms of Mars, and the job situation is going down in our state. People are in dire straits in terms of housing and so forth. What the constituent would say. Would they say, choose this or this? And when appropriators and members of Congress are coming down to what they do, as much as we would like to inject the passion that we feel for these things, there is that voice that they listen to on a regular basis. So that's why I'm advocating that we do a better job at strategizing around what the messaging is, how we explain that it's not on the traditional list of bread and butter issues, but it is a bread and butter issue for other reasons.
Yes?
Hi, good morning. Thank you all for all of your wonderful work.
And you'll tell us who you are and who you're with?
Indeed. My name is Ron Drummond. I'm an independent scholar and futurist, and I just published this 8,000-word essay, The First Woman on Mars, for this occasion. And I have copies, and they're available free to all of the women here, both in the audience and up there. I just wanted to offer some frames of reference, and I've been very pleased for the long-term, the recognition of the importance of long-term thinking. Sir Martin Rees, the British Royal Astronomer, published a book a few years ago called Our Final Hour. And his analysis was he gave the human race 50-50 chance of making it to the end of this century without utterly destroying ourselves. And we have to, so the widest possible lens for the future going forward for planet Earth, for human beings, for life in the universe, the widest possible lens here is at one extreme, there's a very good chance we will destroy ourselves in the next 100 years, possibly at any time in the next 100 years. The opposite extreme is really marvelous. We now know that the physical universe is set up in such a way that life could continue to flourish for 100 trillion years into the future. And that lovely possibility at that opposite extreme is an opportunity for us to try to evolve ourselves into a more compassionate species, to move out into space, to nurture and protect the life we find that's already out there, and to nurture and protect the life that we bring with us, and to spread seeds of life throughout the local cluster of galaxies.
We appreciate your passion, but is there a policy question in there?
Well, yeah, or
because
just
there are a lot of
but I want to. Okay,
there are
but
a lot of people standing behind.
Yes.
you,
Oh, indeed.
so-
Okay. So there's that frame of reference, and then. My concern is with this slow step-by-step going into space is a lovely thing to want to do, but it may be we don't have time. We really might not have the time. Even a minor major global catastrophe could eliminate our ability to do anything in space for decades or centuries. We might not have 100 years to do all of these things. So this is important stuff. We talk about fiscal...
And what is your question, please?
Fiscal...
What is your question? Could you tell us your question, please?
Oh, sure.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to be rude, but there are all the people standing behind you, and we only have 18 minutes left. So what is your question?
Fiscal austerity is partially a matter of priorities and how we reapply priorities. My point is simply that Sorry,
Your question is?
yeah. I would like to have your responses to, like with Artemis, the points that I'm making. And if I can just, if you can give me 60 seconds.
30 seconds.
Oh, okay, thanks, Marcia. The material wealth of the solar system is 1 billion times that of Earth. If you can do policy, and it's very expensive front end, but if you're very careful, you can set up a situation in 20 to 40 years where the wealth, instead of going from the Earth out, comes out back down. And I just would like to ask for your feedback on those perspectives.
All right,
thank you so much.
Okay. Who would like to take that? Pascal?
Yeah. A short answer. I think we are living on an extremely unique planet. When you look at astronomical research and knowing our solar system, we have to recognize that our planet is unique and probably one of the only planets where intelligent life actually arose. And when you look at the clock, I always show this to my students. It is true that we are a tiny, tiny second on the evolutionary clock of 5.6 billion years of the age of our planet. But we have the responsibility, actually, to cherish that planet. And looking out for space exploration, as I have showed you, the link with Earth sciences and providing these synergies, we learn more about our planet, we learn more how to protect our planet. And you had the Planetary Protection Officer here yesterday, which will tell you the same. We want to protect our solar system. We don't want to leave and abandon and demolish this planet. We have the responsibility to do the best on Earth and still to explore our outside and also protect the outside environment. This is my short answer to that, but I'm sure there's more to talk about.
Just one on the long time frame that it takes to design and develop and fly missions. It is true. It is. And although the emphasis I think that many of us have is on designing and developing smaller, less expensive missions, the trend is the opposite, towards increasingly complex missions. And my view is that means that we have to figure out how to do things better, quicker, simpler. I don't want to say faster, better, cheaper. I didn't say that. But we do have to figure this out, and we have to do it together. We have to realize that NASA doesn't know everything. And we have to work with our commercial partners. They have a lot of great ideas to do this better, and our international partners. So,
thank you. Anyone else? Okay.
My name is Pamela Conrad. I'm a research space scientist at NASA Goddard Space Flight Center. I'm the deputy PI of one of the investigations that is leaving for Mars very soon. I have a policy question, and it's in the context of things that basically all of you have said, but in particular, the most recent comments of Rebecca, Pascal, and Patty. So we all agree that international exploration is going to be key to achieving such a great big project goal as the next set of flagship missions to Mars. That being said, we also understand the dire economic climate that's global at the moment. We further understand that the Office of Management and Budget has a number of considerations, and that we're just one of them. And we even yet again understand that it is our personal responsibility to put on the pumps and pearls and go to Congress and make known our opinions as constituents where relevant. So the question is, what am I not saying correctly as a constituent that should be conveyed to give you fuel to bring to the Office of Management and Budget that says a 20% across the board cut in travel this year is not appropriate to help build international collaboration in science, in engineering, in project management, and even going forward as we plan the operations for Mars Science Laboratory? So any advice, I'm ready to go do it. Give me the homework.
Well, I do have to say, certainly, we need to meet with each other to form our international collaborations. They are extremely important. We have to live with these tough fiscal times. And I know that NASA is the place to come up with innovative ways to interface with our partners virtually, using our technology better to do so and formulate these commitments. Now, I do have to say that international commitments are really important. Partnerships are extremely important, but they're not necessarily cheaper. We do them for a lot of reasons, but budget isn't usually one of them. And so that's another thing that we really have to do when we're formulating our international partnerships is demonstrate the true benefit of these partnerships. And usually it's more scientifically, it's for international diplomacy reasons, and it's because it's the right thing to do. But we have to do a better job of really proving why this partnership is important.
I like your question a lot. And the reason that I like your question is that it challenges the notion that we're doing what we need to do, we have what we need to have to accomplish where we're trying to go. I think what is missing in the conversation is the question of when you go to Congress and you talk to Congress, what kind of leadership do you want from our nation? What does it look like? Is a part of that equation going to destinations on a sustained spiral and being first to achieve things, continuing that legacy of first and achievement that this country is known for? Because we're not doing that in a vacuum anymore. Lots of conversations go on every day about China and about how China in the past has sent its students, its scholars here to learn and go back to China. They don't have to do that anymore. So America's a superpower, I personally think, has been in the process of being redefined rather, for a number of years now. So what's missing from the equation, I think, from the conversation with Congress is getting out a little bit on the risk side and putting in the discussion. We are doing things in a very moderated way. We are challenged by annual budgets. We are challenged by the conversations that with oversight committees and appropriators and where the rubber meets the road at the agency level. All of that rolls up into how we define leadership in any area in this country. And what type of leadership do we really want? If we want a leadership in space and exploration that is unparalleled in any place in the world, then we are going to have to do things differently. We're going to have to appropriate differently. We're going to have to embrace the notion of it's an imperative. We don't have choice.
Anyone else?
Now, I just want to, I think your question is really important, and it also applies certainly to other space powers. And from the European standpoint, I can just say that Europe has actually to find a consensus among many, many different nations which are part of the European space business and science and technology, and that is always something very complicated. And what I think is done really, really well in the United States is that the scientific community is extremely active and sells. You are really here, you're selling, you are in the public, and this is something what we, I think, lack in Europe. There is much more public outreach necessary in order really to activate and to have a common European space policy and strategy in order to be a strong partner.
Okay.
Hello, I'm Angela Pura, and I'm an independent space policy consultant and a graduate of this fine institution, the Space Policy Institute. My question to you is that Stephanie brought up, and I think everyone in this room agrees, that the goal is to have an expansion of humanity beyond this planet. A lot of people say the end destination is Mars. I would like to think bigger than that, but Mars is certainly a good interim goal. Patty Grace has brought up that we need better strategic communications. So my question to you is, how do we bring these two ideas together? How do we bring the concept of expansion of humanity beyond the Earth and the need for better strategic communication together? What do we need to say? Who do we need to talk to? And how can we say what needs to be said in a more effective manner? Because it's clear that the message is not reaching the appropriate people, both within the public and within the government.
Well, that's a question that has lots of different answers and lots of different parts. STEM is a part of that, though. I think that there is probably one of the most powerful lobbies in the country is parents of students in schools who are not being challenged, who are not being inspired to do the kinds of things and be the kind of leaders that we are talking about here. They could be by engaging more with what's going on in science, what NASA is doing. That message needs to come into the classroom through the parents as an imperative to the educational system to create a different dynamic so kids can learn and be inspired and look to the future in terms of how they're going to use what they're doing in the classroom in a realistic way. The messaging as far as the strategy, the strategic communication side of it goes, is coming up with some plan, some overarching plan that pulls in all the various stakeholders, all the people who have an interest in where we go, what we do, Mars being a destination among many. But in terms of the civilization point, I would be interested in knowing from this institution, from George Washington, from the Policy Institute, of where do you want to take it? How far do you think it needs to go? And then collectively, we would have to develop the language that goes into that message. I just think that when I go outside of Washington, travel to smaller communities or medium-sized communities, and talk about some of the tremendous things that, for example, NASA is accomplishing, the science community is engaged in, people don't know about those things. They really don't know about them. And as much as we like to think and talk about the money that we put behind promotional campaigns and so forth to get the word out, they really don't know.
Just to tag on, oh, sorry. Patty Grace, part of strategic communications is also, of course, knowing your audience and having a number of different messages that communicate the wide range of benefits that space exploration provides. So expansion of humanity into the universe is appealing to some particular audiences. For other audiences, it might be a little bit...
Something different.
Yeah, something different. And they might be thinking, again, like a lot of the communities that Patty Grace talks to, you know, of things that are just immediate, you know, again, next meal, all that. So, you know, communicating to them things about the benefits on Earth that NASA provides. So we know this, and within NASA strategic messaging, we're developing a series of messages targeted at different audiences. We need to do it a lot better, but we're working it.
Stephanie, did you want to say anything?
No, I just, along the strategic communications line, I think where you can get more people involved in actually working and interacting in space and experiments that students can do, that more people can participate in. And that's additionally one of Elon's goals in starting SpaceX, was to have more people that could participate than just astronauts. And so with our Dragon program, we're able to hopefully launch more affordable payloads quicker, so that more people can be involved and launch experiments more quickly. And so I think the more people that are involved and have a hands-on experience there, the more support you'll get.
Okay, thank you. We have 4 minutes left before the next panel, so we have just time for two focused questions and some focused answers.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Wallace. I run a company called Giraffe and Ant Productions, so I'm part of the general public. Giraffe sees the big picture, Ant handles the details. And what I do is I help kids learn about what the opportunities are in new space and help them create planetarium shows with their own voices. The reason why I'm here today is that I think we might want to consider redefining the term higher education. I'm sure that we all want our children to have a higher education, but perhaps that means the view of Earth from space. And what I'm saying is that if you use the programs like Virgin Galactic, and perhaps if we create something like a social networking and fundraising entity which will help send the people that we want to go to space on a Virgin Galactic or X-Corps flight, so that young people, as soon as they turn perhaps 18, before they follow their college education, can see Earth from space, can see no national boundaries, can see that the entire world is home. And on a Virgin Galactic flight, and I don't work for them, with 6 people aboard, perhaps they can self-select the people that they want to go on the flight with them using social networking, such as somebody from Vanuatu, Afghanistan, Paraguay, Mali, and whatever, and New Zealand, on the same flight to perhaps create their own projects out of those systems. And what I'm saying is that I don't think the funding should always necessarily be from taxes. It could be from people who could now feel that they could go to space, or that somebody from their country could be the first one to go to space who's been, not considered before because of the gross national product of that country, or they don't have any resources, or their education is not great. So could you please say what do you think would be, do you think that something like that would be a good viable way to get children who are in middle school now to aspire to actually physically be in space by the time they're 18 years old?
Well, a couple of things I would say. I like the idea as an advisor to Virgin Galactic. I'll pass all of that along. It sounds great. It sounds great. Of course, one of the issues in terms of the space tourism and travel is that we're grappling with, and the government, the FAA, grappled with it, was what is the age limit, and pretty much looked at 18, which is legal age in this country for driver's licenses and that kind of thing. But I like the notion of looking from space to Earth as higher education, as a means of reversing out how we traditionally look at it. I think that the more that we can get students involved at the earliest point in touching, in seeing metal being bent, in looking at engines being tested, how you develop a trajectory, how you bound the risk of flight when you're having a launch, those kinds of things, the more they will understand that math that they're getting in the classroom, theories that they are being introduced to, all of that. I was just last week talking to a governor in a certain location. I don't want to expose his location, but let's just say it was in a state where there are space resources and assets all around. And he was talking about how his son was having difficulty connecting with it, understanding what he could do with it. Right there, all around. I said, well, has he been to visit the plant, such and such a location? Has he seen how they integrate the parts of a vehicle? No, he hasn't. I said, well, maybe that's a good starting point, because math doesn't connect in a vacuum. Science doesn't connect in a vacuum, I don't think. It's when they can see it. So I like the idea, the experiential side of what you're saying, to inspire and propel and engage students going forward. And I think your notion for Virgin Galactic may be something that the company is even thinking about.
Thank you. I think that's going to have to be the last word, because we have another panel coming up behind us. And thank you all, and thank the panel.